So good morning and welcome to our special edition of Bible study with St. Patrick's Day. I'm seeing all sorts of green. We even have a couple of light up shamrock necklaces in the crowd. This is very nice. This is very nice. Unfortunately, I do not have any green clericals, and I think it'd be irreverent to have a green thing. Pastors wear these weird shirts because it's supposed to be let the rest of us, oh, that's very cute, let the rest of us kind of blend into the background, but then pay attention to the word box, the words that are happening. But I am wearing green socks. So here's the story of St. Patrick's Day, in case you haven't already heard it. Hopefully you have. Wikipedia actually has a pretty awesome article on St. Patrick. So St. Patrick, he was like 14 years old, 15 years old. He was British, and he got kidnapped by Irish pirates. And so they kidnapped him. He was enslaved for something like 4 to 6 years. And then he was a shepherd, taking care of all sorts of things that you would have a slave do almost 1,500 years ago. And then St. Patrick had an opportunity to sneak out of Ireland on a boat. He jumped on this boat, and then he got back to England, found his family, reconnected, and he became a priest. He became a priest. And so if Patrick were right here, right now, and we spoke ancient Gaelic or whatever dialect he was most comfortable with speaking, Latin he would have picked up. But if he were standing right here, he would have said, I wasn't really a Christian until I was a slave. And then when I was a slave, suddenly God was really important to me. I had to pay attention, and I was talking to him, and he provided this ship. He provided this new start, this new opportunity. And so then he became a priest. And so he was actually thankful to God for being a slave, because had it not been for being a slave, he would have just kind of been arm's distance away from God, or worse. And so he felt compelled to go back to Ireland to bring the gospel to the people who brought him back to the gospel. So I doubt he would have been like, yay! I know he wasn't, yay, when he was captured and turned into a slave. But sometimes God can use terrible storms to do tremendous good, right? And all of us can probably come up with examples of that. Anywho, so there he was back in Ireland to share the faith with them. Now, there were other people who had been Christian and went to Ireland. There were other people who tried to bring the faith to Ireland. At this time, there's a lot of Druid religion and culture floating around and other things. But he was the first widely successful bringer of the gospel to Ireland, which is why he's the patron saint of Ireland and all sorts of other things. So this is the day where everyone is Irish, right? And that's why we all drink green beer. Oh, you're not Irish. Right. There's still a lot of tension between England and Ireland. Especially, Northern Ireland, yeah. So, the reason why we celebrate on March 17th is because that's when St. Patrick was put to death on March 17th around the year 460. And it's just a precious story in our heritage to say that sharing the faith with people sometimes puts you in uncomfortable situations. Could you imagine what was going through Patrick's head as he's getting on a boat to go back to the land in which he was a slave? Is this going to work? Am I going to be like many of our ancestors in the faith, where I go over with a really good idea, but then I'm put to death, 3 months into it? Although not everyone in Ireland was brought into the Christian faith through St. Patrick's work, a lot of them were, and they left behind bizarre things like human sacrifice and just twisted things. And so he's a very, very famous person in the church. And apparently, they even turned green lights on the Great Wall of China today. On the pyramids of all places. I was surprised about that they actually will turn green lights on the pyramids. Because as you know, Egypt is almost 90% Muslim. That means there's 90% of we don't like Christianity people in Egypt. But there is 10% of Egypt that is Christian, passionately Christian. And so all that to say, this is why I'm going to be using a green pen for our Bible study today. All right. If you need a handout, it's the same handout as last time for 1 Samuel chapter 2. Right over there on that table, I kind of fanned them out. And so we're going to be working through 1 Samuel chapter 2 today. We're going to probably finish up with this. And then I already got a ton of great notes on 1 Samuel chapter 3 that we can, that we might even jump into to start off with. I was very excited about it. Man, this has been a very cool book. All right, let's talk to God. Father, thank you for the privilege to belong to you and the privilege to have so many people who have shown us what it means to bring the faith. Thank you for St. Patrick and all the people that he reached and all the people who gave him an open ear and allowing us to be able to be on that same mission, that same activity, that same reach that you are extending to this world, that people would hear your word through us. There's a lot of people around us who used to be Christian, or their parents used to be Christian, or their grandparents were Christian, but they aren't. We pray that the love that won their grandparents, that won their parents, that won the ancient Irish to the gospel, that won Patrick, would win us so wonderfully that it would win the people around us as well. In your name, Lord Jesus, together we all pray. Amen. I thought about doing the whole Bible study with an Irish accent, but I thought that was probably a little too much. All right, so we left off in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 21, and we talked about what it would be like to grow up in heaven, right? Walking close to Jesus. And obviously Eli did not walk closely with God. He and his sons, his worthless sons, did not know God. They followed God more than an arm's reach. They were actually like Judas, robbing God. Now remember, his sons were not just worthless. Does anybody remember what that word was when it described Eli's sinful sons? Ruinous. Yeah. We talked about how sin is always ruinous, right? It's always ruinous. There's no such thing as a harmless sin, right? There's no such thing as a harmless disobedience. No such thing as a harmless little bit of bad, right? It's always ruinous, not just worthless, not just bad.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
I've dealt with kids a lot, and they will call you as an adult on something that might be a lie, but you're saying it to make somebody else feel better. I'm trying to think of an example.
Your hair looks fine.
Yeah, your hair looks lovely when it doesn't. That type of thing.
Yeah.
The kids always catch me on that.
Well, good. So
grandkids.
sometimes, so for the internet folks, you said sometimes kids who sometimes out of the mouths of babes are painfully honest. And so then they will call you on it when you say something that might be untrue just to make someone feel better. All right, so here's the deal on lying. There's two kinds of lies. First off, when a soldier is out on the battlefield, like let's say World War II, since everybody is almost on the same page with this, when Nazis were coming to round up people to put into concentration camps, if an American soldier pulls the trigger and a Nazi dies, that American soldier is not murdering people, that American soldier is defending life, right? And so when a soldier, in a soldier context, ends someone's life, they are not ending a life, they're not murdering, they're actually there to protect life, so that way if something really bad, if this person were allowed to be, continue to do their job, that they were hired to do, which is, round up people for concentration camps, they would actually be spreading death. So it's kind of like an executioner. If he puts to death a serial killer at the cost of one life, 30 more lives are saved. That executioner is not murdering. That executioner, by ending a murdering life, is actually saving lives. So although the act seems the same, it isn't the same. Does that make sense? Okay, so love compels us to stop evil. All right. So if you were a spy for a government and national security depended on you telling the people you're supposed to trick, no, I'm not American spy, comrade. That's not lying. That's you protecting life, freedom, whatever the job is, okay? If you're not a spy, when you're lying, you're breaking the rules. The reason why I say that is, so if somebody's hair does not look lovely, but you want them to feel good, you can say other things like, like, what does my hair look like? Hair sometimes does its own thing, but it's not terrible. Now, if it looks terrible, love would compel you to say, you're having a creative hair day today. But, so yeah, even things like that, because then someone's going to go out, if they are having a terrible hair day, and you go, oh, I love your hair, they're going to feel really good about their hair. And then if somebody says, your hair looks stupid, it's going to hurt twice as much. And then they're going to be upset that you didn't say anything. So when there's something that I really can't compliment somebody on something, I will generally find something else to compliment them on. Now, I don't want anybody to get nervous about this. Like if I say, hey, I like your necklace, then you go, oh, so you hate my pants? Right? Don't worry about that. But, like that infamous example of a wife asking her husband, does this dress make me look fat? Yes is going to cause a lot of pain. Right? So what would be the better answer? Honey, I love you just the way you are. And if that dress doesn't make you feel good, then change. But I'm not looking at you. I'm not looking at the dress. I'm looking at you. So you got to be tactful about that. So before I jump off this soapbox, one of the harmless lies is the Santa Claus idea. All right, so parents, if your 4-year-old is watching this, how awesome that your 4-year-old is watching an adult Bible study, but just skip ahead maybe 30 seconds. We never told our kids that Santa Claus delivers presents. And I'm not faulting anybody who did, because we decided I would hate to give an imaginary person all the credit for us shelling out all the cash, picking out the perfect gifts, and loving them so much. So then Christmas was, wow, mom and dad really paid attention to us, loved us, cared for us. This is amazing. As opposed to, wow, mom and dad, you got us socks. Santa Claus, he got us a bike. So I'm not going to hate on anybody who did the Santa Claus thing. My parents did the Santa Claus thing, and I turned out all right. But it's like, the Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, the invitation of Jesus to love God and love the people around us, even if it stings a little bit, always be honest. But don't be painfully honest. This is like somebody says something wrong and then you correct their grammar. Don't be that person. People hate the fact checkers, right? People hate the grammarians, the people who, at the stoplight, you roll down the window and you say, hey, you should have put your indicator on 4 seconds sooner. There's a time when you just kind of, but always be honest. Unless you're a spy. And then it's okay. Unless you're at home, and then be honest. But only when you're doing your spy stuff. All right. Did that answer it? All good? Okay. So verse 22. So now Eli was very old. If you're in your handouts, if you need a handout, we got a bunch over there. If you're at home and you want one of our super spaced out handouts so you can take little notes, just shoot us an email at church@zionmh.org, and we'll get right back to you. All right, so now Eli was very old. Now this means he was around, based on the timelines and estimates, he's about 90 to 95 years old. So he's got a few years on him, right? That's a pretty good run, especially since they didn't have modern medicine or health care. If you got poked by something barbed and metal, there were no tetanus shots, so, count down the days or weeks. So he did pretty well. He was very old, and he kept hearing that his sons, all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So now if you're just tuning in now, your first time, Eli is the high priest. His sons were therefore the priests. They're supposed to be helping the sacrifices. Last time, you can check it out on our YouTube page and on our webpage. Last time we talked about how his sons were actually like sticky fingering the offering, right? Taking some of the money or taking some of the sacrifices out and all sorts of other bad stuff. So now, what do you think's behind this verse 22? They were laying with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. What do you make of this? So that is a possibility, that they were laying with prostitutes. Remember, the tent of meeting was, they had this vast tent. Don't think of a pup tent, but think of this massive, awesome tent with several layers and golds inside and hide and all this other cool stuff, sealed, and golden stands and furniture, beautiful stuff. So these would be women who would serve at the doorway of the tent of meeting. So now run through your head, in the Old Testament, when they had to follow all these different rules, what women were supposed to be at the entrance of the tent of meeting? Can anybody think of any? Yeah, there were none. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it say women shall be hired, employed, to serve at the tent of meeting. At one point, we might think of this as like the nuns, like in the Catholic Church or in the Lutheran Church, deaconesses, which you would have female women, part of the whole church community, doing different things like leading Sunday school or helping with Bible study or teaching or like counseling or serving as like hospice chaplains, things like this, that they're doing things, or in music, right? All those sorts of things that people do in the church. But in Old Testament times, they didn't have that. At the temple, there was the priestly staff and then their families. There were other shrines, though, that had women fully employed by the shrines, and those women, all of the gods outside of Yahweh in the Middle East, they were all sex gods. They were all sex gods. You wanted it to rain on your crops, well, then you'd go to the temple of Baal, and then you would hire one or more of the male priests, or one or more of the female priestesses, or a mixed combination, and then you would all have sex. I can only imagine what that'd be like when you walk into a church coffee shop, right? Every time the door bells, that's somebody walked in. I'm sorry. And then you would hire them for however long, and that was supposed to be a reminder to the gods what they're supposed to be doing with their friends up there, and that would cause there to be rain on your fields. Or if you wanted your business to be prosperous, you'd go to a shrine of a different god or goddess, and you'd do the same thing. And if you wanted a good trip, then you would go to the sea god, Yam. You'd go to his temple and do the same thing. And so it's all based around sex. Why are they having sex out in the doorway of the temple? This is how bad it was. Who was in charge of making sure that everything was done the right way at this time? Eli. So we see what it's like when Eli is the high priest. His sons are ripping people off. The servants are threatening to beat people up. There's prostitutes there, right? Hey, honey, what were you doing? I was at church. Wait. You were at church or you were at church? They shouldn't have to have that question, right? But, so this is all bad. I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she said, could you imagine how hard it would have been to take your little baby Samuel and put it in this community, right? That's going to be raised by Eli and his sons and these women who are there for not just hired by the priest, but everybody. Could you imagine? Clearly, there's a lot of trust in God going on there, right? There's a lot of trust in God going on in there. All right, so verse 23. So he said to them, to the sons, Eli saying to the sons, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear the people of Yahweh spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against Yahweh, who could intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of Yahweh to put them to what? So what should Eli have done?
Stop it before it started.
Yeah, now if he's 90 to 95 years old, how old are his sons? Yeah, we're looking at upper 60s, 70s. He's had 70 years with these kids. And what's his reprimand? Yeah, like a, come on guys. Well, if it didn't work for the first 7 years, what about now? What do we got?
What did you have this morning? Did you have Irish cream?
Irish cream white mocha.
Okay, well that's Irish cream mocha.
Irish cream mocha for St. Patrick.
I don't have Irish eyes, but they're smiling at you anyway.
Your eyes are actually chocolate like mocha.
That's true. That's true.
I like the green shirt.
Oh, thank you.
I have green socks on, in case nobody heard. That's kind of the most important part of my whole day. I'm actually very excited today. We've got Bible study. We've got church later on. Oh, I'm very excited about the topic we're going to talk about. Have you all been enjoying this Friend of God series? We've been doing this Friend of God series for Lent, and it's been awesome. If you haven't been, you can catch us online on our website. Oh, I've been loving this. And if you haven't been following along on our website, we've got all of our sermons, like the last 4 services. You can obviously go farther back, all the way back until March when we first got closed down by the pandemic. So then every Sunday, and then often on Wednesdays, we're also putting up all these worship services, and we'd love to worship with you. All right, so I don't remember where I was, so let's just start over at 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1. That's right. So yeah, his response, his reprimand for his kids for 70 years has been, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Really? Guys. Did you know that in the Old Testament, if a child disobeyed you, like severely disobeyed, not like clean your room, I don't feel like it, not like that, but like severely disobeyed you, the punishment was death. Now that sounds stern, right? Right? I have told you to wash the dishes for the 3rd time this week. You either do it, or I'm getting the axe, right? Or, man, I gotta get home by curfew, or mom's gonna kill me. For real, Now, although that sounds extreme, on the other side, if that was a punishment held over your head, how seriously would you take what mom and dad said? Now, there is no example that I can think of. There is no example in the entire Old Testament that they ever did this. And if God really wanted them to do this, he would have, sent some boils or plagues or snakes or something to make sure that they carried this out. He didn't. But the reason why in the Old Testament the rules, including this one, are so sharp is because God is passionate about his people keeping themselves pure, to not play around with bad stuff. And if you're going to listen to mom and dad, then you're going to have the values of mom and dad, and then you're not going to do the really weird stuff like torturing animals, or the weird things that people will do. Because obviously, if your parents have been able to do life well, they must know how to do life well in this world. They'd be good people to learn from. Obviously, things break down when moms and dads aren't the best, right? But according to the system, they would have been removed from the community, right? And then you would have other role models. So we're not bound by the Old Testament, but in the Old Testament, it's a great reminder that we're supposed to be pure. We're supposed to be pure and make pure decisions and do good things because the world needs us to. All right, so unfortunately, he wasn't being very strong enough. What do y'all think about this verse 25? If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against Yahweh, who can intercede for him? So here's kind of the summary. I know it's kind of sometimes in the Bible we're like, wait, what? What it's basically saying is if you wrong somebody, God will be the go-betweener. But if you intentionally do something that God doesn't want you to do, because God doesn't want you to do it, you're on your own. What do you think about that? Now, well, don't run to the New Testament yet.
Well, you said he was all over the Old Testament, so.
He is, yeah. And on one side, this is Eli speaking, not the best spiritual role model, right?
He's also saying he wouldn't stand
Yeah. Yeah, so in the Old Testament, sacrifices were allowed for unintentional sins. And I know I mentioned this before. Unintentional sins. So if you unintentionally, accidentally sinned, all you had to do was walk to the temple, give a sheep, give a lamb to the priest. They'd sacrifice it. You get a little bit of a meal, and then you can go on your way. For unintentional sin. Does anybody remember the penalty for intentional sin? Like if you knew that you weren't supposed to do it and you did it? 2 options. If it was really bad, yeah, death. If it wasn't like you built a temple to a fake god kind of sin, but if it was something intentional, all you had to do was be exiled from all of God's people for the rest of your life. As in, now you live in Brazil. Move. Could you imagine? Now, if that were the penalty, how intentional would you be about coloring inside the lines? Right? You would. So this would be sinning against somebody else, but then not sinning against God. And then as you went right to the New Testament, as all Christians should, what happens if we do something that it's wrong and we know it's wrong while we're doing it? Who stands in the in-between for us? Jesus does. God does. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. And what's so precious about that is it's not Jesus loving the world, he obviously does, but it's the Father who loves the world that much, that he said, I would rather throw my Son away to keep you than keep my Son and not have you. And that's not just like a collective you, that's an each of you. That's pretty cool. That's why St. Patrick, as we talked about earlier, that's why St. Patrick was willing to go to Ireland, the land of his slavery, to share the gospel with people. Are we willing to do that? Not go to Ireland, but go to the people around us and share what we know about God? There is something neat about this verse. He says that if somebody sins against another person, God will work out the mediation. I think we forget that a lot. Somebody does something wrong to us, then we like stew on it and we think we got to fix it, we got to work on it, and we got to make sure that they won't do it again, that they know how badly they hurt us, and all this bad stuff that like builds up inside of us. But imagine if we took God at his word, not just this word, but all over the Bible, took him at his word that said, if somebody wrongs you, we could actually forgive them and let God work out the details. How would that change things? And it's quiet.
Pressure off of us that we put on, some of our stress.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off of us. And honestly, it frees us to forgive. It frees us to forgive. We don't have to keep a list of all the people that we're not talking to anymore. We don't have to keep a list of all the people that we're still mad because they did something back in 1972. And the Bible actually, as God's talking to us, Paul, as he's writing to the Christians at Rome, he had been sinned against so many times. And many times people would try to beat him up, and he'd go into the city the next day and try to save them. Right? It's like, hey, you beat me up. I'm not holding it against you. In fact, I still love you. That's a tremendous witness. That is a tremendous witness. And when we trust God to work out the details, it makes it a lot easier to forgive people. All right, so if you listen to my sermons recently, I came up with an example a while ago of somebody who, I'm on the treadmill and I'm jogging right there, which I know it sounds so weird. You're like, how that guy always is against cardio, but apparently I've got to take care of my heart, whatever. So I looked down the treadmill, a few treadmills, and I saw this guy, and I've known him a long time, hadn't talked to him, he never really talks to anybody in the gym. And so I said, hey, so I see you made the switch from Gold's, which is what it was, to the House of Pain, which it is now. And he goes, well, yeah, I did. And then he opens up, can I ask you a question? And if you've been coming to church a lot, you've heard this sermon where I kind of mentioned this. And it was just question after question after question, intended to attack. So I just kind of let it go for about 2 weeks, and then the other day, or maybe 3 weeks, and then the other day he was there, and he had a Band-Aid on his shoulder, and I said, you know, 'tis the season. People with Band-Aids on their shoulders right around this time of the year, it's probably because of a vaccine. And then he just explodes, and he goes, oh, no, now I stepped in it. Now I stepped into it. Oh, this is terrible. You're one of those I hate science people, aren't you? Oh, yeah, because you got your Bible. Oh, I'm like, whoa, wait, what? He goes, you're one of those people, the vaccine, science doesn't help, science hurts, oh, no mask, no mask. And I said, well, I don't see you wearing a mask. And he goes, yeah, but your science thing. And I said, well, no, actually, I've already had both of my vaccines. I'm glad you're catching up. And he goes, oh, really? Oh, I bet you don't want to tell anybody about that. No, I said, actually, I put in the bulletin the week after I got my second shot that I got shot, and I'd love to, because I'm as healthy and as safe as people can be. Obviously, nothing's 100%. He goes, but so now you're on science? You're not a Christian anymore? And he just like explodes. And this whole time I'm thinking, I just need to never talk to this guy again. And I actually said several times, I can tell, as he's just attacking thing after thing, I said, I can tell that us having any sort of conversation isn't good for you and isn't good for me. And so that I was just saying that a couple of times. Not like not talking, back and forth. I wasn't saying like machine gunning, but every time you try to attack me on something that was made up in his head, I returned to that like 4 or 5 times. And then he said something like, well, it's just kind of creepy and weird, like a child molester, that you're staring at me across the gym. And I said, whoa, buddy. And I wove this in. I said, all I did is I was minding my own business, and I saw you with your impressive shoulders have a Band-Aid on it, and I thought, I'm happy for this guy. You know why? Because I care about you. Even if you're mean to me, I care about you. And then the conversation shifted. All of a sudden, this conversation shifted, and he suddenly started to try to find common ground between us. And that was cool. That was cool. Because what was happening is I was almost about to put him on the list of we just don't talk. But for some reason, God just kept pushing me into this conversation, pushing me into this conversation, pushing me into this conversation, to the point where he, like Eli somehow was able to figure out, God was working out this relationship. So now I know his name, he knows my name, and I say, hey, good morning. Hey, buddy, how's it going? But it's so cool. Imagine if we always lived our lives that way, that when there's a disagreement, we just trust God to even the score. So if they do 7 bad things, say 7 bad things to us, or say 5 bad things and don't say 2 right things, and then there was that one thing that they didn't do like we thought that we should have had done for us, and instead of keeping that list, we just say, God, you're going to keep the score, and you're going to bless both of us in this situation. I think our relationships would be drastically different. Drastically different. Right? Drastically different. Church would be different. Families would be different. Workplaces would be different. Neighborhoods would be different. Now, I'm not saying there are some people that no matter what happens, you're just not going to get along with them. But don't wish ill on them. Just be happy that you're just kind of living your own separate lives and they're doing their own thing. But imagine how much less cluttered our hearts would be if we just let God keep the score. Now, it's hard to do that. For me, the easiest thing that makes it easy for me is God's not keeping the scorecard between him and me. Right? And if he's going to do that for me, he'll work out this other thing too. All right, there we go. The key to forgiveness. Just do that the rest of your life and everything will be better. Could you imagine if that's how politicians functioned? Could you imagine if that was how they functioned? Ooh-wee. Could you imagine how much happier the world would be if journalists did that? Instead of, hey, we don't like this person, so what junk could we drudge up on this? Man, I saw an article today, a headline, that there are rumors that Meghan Markle is going to run for president. And as I read the articles, because I just had to see it, which is why they wrote it, but I just had to see this. And there's just minor rumors of other people just kind of saying, wouldn't it be nice? But that's enough for a journalist to stir the pot and get us all angry or mad about all this other stuff, right?
It's impossible, she's no longer a citizen.
Well, do you have to be a citizen your whole life, or do you just have to be born an American citizen?
I don't know, but she renounced her citizenship to marry Harry.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
But I think I think you have to be born American citizen.
To be pressed.
Right. So I think she'd still qualify. I'm just kind of bummed that Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't eligible to be president. Because that would be just kind of cool. I would just like to hear the terms that they have. The presidentinator, you know, like how would you twist that, right? All right. But he didn't do it so hot in California. I don't know all the details, but I know it was not a glorious run in California.
Has anybody ever done anything right in California?
Well, Ronald Reagan came from California, and he was pretty well loved. I mean, obviously he had his critics and everything like
Has
that.
anybody since Ronald Reagan?
I vote for you for the governor of California. Show us how to do it.
I don't want to go to California.
All right, so verse 26. And no offense to the people in California, we love you. You're one of our favorite 50 states. Now the boy Samuel, verse 26, continued to grow both in stature and in favor with Yahweh and also with who? Now this is cool. This whole Eli and his sons and all this stuff, they've been kind of the priests for about 70 years, because Eli would have started when he was around 20 and all the way up. The people of Israel would have known that Eli and his sons were there, but then they're also talking about Samuel. And when you see Samuel, it's not his mission to make Eli look bad. It's his mission just to connect with God. So that's another lesson for us, you know, as we've been talking about this, just let God keep the score. When we spend our time making other people look bad, well, that just kind of pulls people down. But when we just connect with God, we can actually love people that we don't like, or that don't like us, because God's keeping the score. All right, verse 27. And there came a man of God to Eli and said to him, so this would be a prophet, thus says Yahweh, did I indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, subject to the house of Pharaoh? Yes or no? Yeah, they did. His ancestor, his father would have been Aaron, the brother of Moses. Verse 28, did I choose Aaron out of the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to the altar to burn incense and wear an ephod before me? Yes. I gave the house of your father all my offerings by fire of the people of Israel. So basically you can eat from the altar, right? Why then do you scorn my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded for my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people of Israel? Therefore Yahweh, the God of Israel, declares, I promised, past tense, that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now Yahweh declares, far be it from me. For those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. So a couple of things I wanted to go back on this. This honoring God, the Hebrew word is kavod. I'm sorry, kaved. If you're interested in this, it's Q-A-V-E-D. Q-A-V-E-D. So if you're ever playing Scrabble and you have a Q but no U, you can use that word and then refer to this Bible study video, and then who are they going to argue with, right? We'll settle at the old church in the way that they did everything in the early church, by an arm wrestling competition. One of you has this like gigantic big son. All right, settle this now. So this kaved, the reason why this is important is Q-A-V-E-D, kaved. The reason why this is important is it doesn't just mean to honor, but it means to treat as substantial, to treat as, honestly, heavy. Something of heavy significance, right? So if there were a little gold ring sitting here on the table, that's a significance, right? Imagine if instead of a gold ring, there was a gold bar. More significant, right? That would be significant. All right. So it's to treat God as significant, of substance, of importance, of worthy of consideration, right? Mindfulness. The other one, this word despise, I want to make sure I say this one right, is bazah. B-A-Z-A-H. B-A-Z-A-H. And by the authority invested in me by my own self, you can use any of these words in Scrabble. In fact, I probably will later on. I'll be looking for that Z and that B. B-A-Z-A-H. And who are they going to argue with the Bible here? Right? You can't argue with them, All right. So this word bazah, this is even cooler than that kaved word. This means not just to despise, but to treat as flimsy or as worthless or of no heavy significance. So honestly, this word isn't so much despise, because in English, when we think of the word despise, now Lynn, it might be different for you. I'm interested in if it's got a different nuance. But for us, in American English, despise means to like hate or think gross, right? Like if something falls in the toilet, you're like, well, I'm not pulling that thing out, ugh, right? Unless it's here because our toilets are spotless because of COVID. But this is not so much to hate or to like have this like disgust about it, but it's just to like think of it as insignificant. So if instead of a gold ring right here, there was a piece of grass twisted in the shape of a circle, are we going to go out of our way to make sure it doesn't get lost? Are we going to go out of our way to make sure it gets back to its owner? Right? No, it's oops, into the trash, right? And so it's not like we're disgusted by it or we hate it, but it's to think of it as insignificant. Is that how it is across the pond?
Despise would be despised.
Like you hate it, you don't,
It'd be very, very, very clear.
like as in like, oh, I hate it, gross. Okay, yeah. When you're reading the Bible, that word despise, both in the Greek and the Hebrew, it doesn't necessarily mean like hate. It can, but the primary meaning is just to go like, insignificant. And you see it here. Eli's saying, I'll get you in just one sec. Eli here says, well, I could pay attention to what God wants, but I don't want to have arguments with my sons. So I'll think of God's stuff as unimportant, and I'll think of my son's wishes and wills. That's important. So he's not hating God. He's just saying, rules, schmools, God's got rules, he's got forgiveness, I'm the high priest. He's just not important. When we think of God as unimportant or not worth our time, your life will fall apart. You will fall apart. When we say, who is God? What does his word matter? What does his community matter? What do his people matter? What does time with God matter? What does praying matter? When that happens, everything starts falling apart. Not at first. Well, it starts falling apart, but it won't, be a complete mess the moment after. But it will just get worse and worse, like that snowball rolling down a hill towards your town. All right, you're very patient. What's on your mind?
I read somewhere that the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And that's kind of what you're saying there. It's just,
Yeah, so you're saying apathy is an opposite of love.
yeah, not hate.
Yeah, and this is a very good example of that apathy. God says, hey, for us, we do the Lord's Supper every Sunday. Not every church does, you don't have to. But if someone's like, you know what, I don't really need it. I can take it or leave it. You're thinking of God's gifts as insignificant, very apathy, right? Now, something I wanted to touch on here is in verse 27, a man of God comes to Eli. A man of God. I love that illustration. It's very common in the Old Testament. It's a reference for a prophet. If someone is a Ish Elohim, which is a man of God, what would you expect that man of God to act like? godlike. And what does that look like?
Loving, forgiving,
All right, loving, forgiving, gracious. Ooh, because Hannah was a gracious woman. She was godlike, wasn't she? She reflected God.
Giving advice,
All right, a man of God would give advice,
unadvised.
an advisor, but like gently, right? Not like that rude person. You shouldn't do that.
Now you're gonna.
I wouldn't do that if I were you, but I'm smart. I don't know. You know, not like that person, right? What else would it be like to act like a man of God?
dedicated,
Ooh, dedicated. I like that. To God, and by extension to the people around them.
hold yourself to a higher standard.
Should be held to a higher standard. Yeah. What? You had one more too?
Intelligent.
Yeah, they got to know stuff, right? I wrote it down here. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says all of God's people, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 17, all of God's people are men of God. That's men and women. Now, the Greek word there is anthropoi, which we use for anthropology. Anthropology is not just the study of people with male parts. They're the study of humans, right? They're the study of men and women, all humanity, right? And so you are a man or a woman of God. So we should be gracious, be forgiving, honest, but not painfully, brutally, obnoxiously honest, right? Know our stuff, be dedicated, live out a higher standard. Was Eli a man of God?
Yes.
He was not. Remember, he's getting fat off all the offerings that his son stole from everybody. He should have been, but then this man of God says, I don't know you and you don't know me, right? What should the men and women of God sound like? Kind words, yeah. Forgiving, that should be in there. Patient. As James says, like God is, slow to anger and quick to forgive. And see, this is a unique thing that we can do as God's people, because we know we're not on our own. So we can be gracious and we can forgive, and we can sacrificially give of our money and of our time, because we know that whatever we entrust to God, we're not losing. He's just making much out of it, and we get a benefit from that, right? There are so many times when, as a counselor, I'm invited into intense pain of the lives of the people that are around me, and if you ever need counseling or a conversation, it is 100% confidential. You will not be the next week's sermon illustration, right? But it's so precious that as a child of God who's often thrust into a counseling role, I'll be talking to somebody, and as I'm seeing so clearly what should be different in their situation, I can see how I might be struggling or falling short in that same way, maybe not as much, but then say, oh yeah, they're just like 100 feet farther down the road on this than I am. I should pull back before it's something I'm no longer uncomfortable with. And it's so precious that when I give myself, when I give someone the time or my attention or my listening ear, it's so precious that I get to reap rewards from that too. And when we make ourselves available to the people around us, we're doing God things. And God will do things through that, not only for the other person, but for us. One of the most precious things that I'm blown away in is when people will quote me on things. Like when I hear my words or like how I say things and the words of the people around me, I'm like, whoa. And it's so bizarre that God would do much through my words. And the same thing happens to us when we always answer that kingdom call. We have impacts bigger than we could ever have. So serve God. for the other people and for yourself. Okay, so as we finish up here, we have verse 31. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength, your father's house, so that there will be not an old man in your house. Then in distress you will look with envy on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed on Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar, as this man of God is talking to Eli and his descendants, shall be spared to weep his eyes out, to grieve his heart. And all the descendants of your house shall die by the sword. And this shall come upon your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They're the ones who are primarily at work at this bad stuff. Shall be assigned to you. Both of them shall die in the same day. And we're going to see that. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind, and I will build him a sure house. And he shall go in and out before my anointed forever. And everyone who is left in your house shall come to implore him for a silver or a loaf of bread, and say, please put me into one of the priest's places, that I may eat a morsel of bread. So a bunch of cool stuff in here, but since time is upon us, I just want to kind of zoom in on verse 35. In verse 35, God's going to raise up a faithful priest, right? Who will, at the end of verse 35, go in and out before my anointed forever. So if you know that word anointed, it's our word which in English we write M-E-S-S-I-A-H. M-E-S-S-I-A-H. Messiah. So he's going to raise up a priest who will go in and out before his Messiah forever. Which means whoever this is, he will have the faith. He will be a believer. He will be connected to God. He will end up going to heaven. And he will go in and out before his Messiah forever. Now, if you were talking to a Jewish person in Jesus' day, Messiah, you've got three kinds. You've got kings who are anointed. That's what the word Messiah means. It means anointed. You have kings who are anointed, and that isn't a thing at this time in Samuel, right? There were no kings. Prophets were anointed, and priests were anointed. We already had a reference to this like eternal Messiah previously in 1 Samuel 1 and 2, and here we have it a second time. Jesus is all over the Old Testament, all over there. This Messiah is the anointed that they were looking for when Jesus is walking around. And in the New Testament, the Greek word for Messiah, because the New Testament wrote in Greek, the New Testament word for Messiah, which is a Hebrew word, the New Testament word is Greek, is Christ. And so in the Old Testament, the whole time, ever since the Garden of Eden, they were looking for the Messiah, the Savior, the appointed, anointed one who would be sent by God to do what God does, which means he's got to be God. And here you can see that this anointed one would be enthroned. Already we get this little wink and a nod to Jesus. It's like the third or fourth time just in these two chapters, which is awesome. As a man or a woman of God, that same offer is before you. You get to go in and out before the anointed, before Jesus, forever. One day in this city. But right now, you are living your life in the presence of Jesus. Right now, you're living your life in the presence of Jesus. So when you bank yourself on promises of God that he will even the score, he will take care of you, he will watch over you, you're going in and out. You're living your life with Jesus involved. It's a very small picture of God when we think that, well, he's up there. He's kind of doing God's stuff. We're living our lives, and then after I die, then we'll connect. It's a very small picture of God. The real picture of God is he's paying attention to absolutely everything you do. And when we do things that honor him, that treat him as weighty, that kaved word, that substance word, he notices, he appreciates, and he compensates. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. It might just be that you get a clearer conscience, right? The New Testament is very clear on this. It means that our prayers can be prayed with more joy, as opposed to, well, God, I want you to beat up this guy. Not me when I do something like that, but just the other guy. That clutters up your faith in so many ways. All right, so we are done with 1 Samuel chapter 2. Next time we'll pick up 3. Were there any hands or thoughts or things that you wanted to share, insights you wanted to share that I forgot to circle back around and call on you? All right. Apparently we did all things well once again. In honor of St. Patrick, who was British. Father, thank you for the day that you blessed us to belong to you. Thank you for the people who have courageously lived their lives before you, knowing that you are involved, knowing that you are taking notice, and knowing that you are rejoicing. Please watch over us and grant that in our time we would do the same. Thank you for Samuel. Thank you for being in our lives, and grant that at some point down the way, whether they know our names or not, that they would also rejoice in you because of what you have done through us. In your name, together we all pray. Amen.